How are you? Welcome to the Critical Moves of Telesur. Today we're going to be talking about the second term of the President Piñera. How has the social atmosphere going on? Let's analyze this. Let's listen to part of the balance that President Piñera has done over the last 2 years. We know that these measures will not solve all of the problems of all Chileans. That will never happen. But we also know that they mean a huge effort of the country, of the state, of society as a whole, to give this sense of comprehensive to all of the demands that our fellow citizens have raised their voice about, and they will help the security. Our government has been committed to ensure a transition that is peaceful. That is why we condemn violence, regardless of where it comes from. But along with being pacific, we want it to be transparent and happy and participative, and that it reflects the will of the people of Chile. There are those who say that everything is insufficient, and they're not aware of what they're talking about. Never in the history of Chile has there been such a comprehensive plan, and that has so much budget to it. And I hope that this agreement with all the Chileans, we will get through it. This is what Piñera has said, but what has the country said? Sebastián Piñera is surrounded by a lot of people that are his friends and not necessarily the most competent people. So they have not given any solution to the problems of the citizens. Nevertheless, he has been unable to keep security. Viva Chile, free and sovereign. We want to ask the people of the United Nations to stay away. Nothing has changed. Everything is just the same as before of October 17. The only thing that has changed is that people have woken up. Well, Chile has to improve. We just woke up. We're not going to be quiet anymore. Look, I think this is a historic moment in Chile nowadays, that the social movements and basically the youth, the young people and the NGOs are going to work in the new constitution, because nowadays everything that we lack is the product of a constitution that was made during the dictatorship. Let's locate Chile, of what today we're going to be speaking about. Chile. The Republic of Chile is located in the south of the American continent. The borders are Bolivia, Peru, Argentina, and the passage of Drake. It is in 3 continents. The continent sector that has the coast to the Pacific. The islands that are of the volcanic origin, and there's a part of the Antarctic. The relatively small area dominates in terms of population and agricultural resources, with a total surface of 756,102 square kilometers. According to the World Bank, it is a high-income country. However, it's only been a lab of the neoliberalism in America after the Pinochet regime. The main product is copper. This is called the land of Chile because it's a major producer in the world, and it satisfies 36% of the world need. It also has lithium and other resources like iron, molybdenum, nitrates, gold, and silver. Seven families are the ones that control the seas of the country. Although the Constitution says it's a democratic country, things don't seem that way because of the constant repression of the protesters. The Constitution was approved in 1980 during the Pinochet dictatorship, and it responds to the great interests of big capitals. So now we ask, who is Sebastián Piñera? This man was born in Chile, December 1st of 1949, in a well-to-do family. The father was a public servant who was an ambassador during the time of Eduardo Frei. He studied business administration and economy, and then he finished in the United States to get a master's and a PhD in Harvard. His life has been near to the politics, and he is owner of one of the biggest fortunes of Chile. And he has over $2 billion as his wealth, according to the Forbes magazine. Ever since the end of the 70s, he had a participation in companies that have their airlines, infrastructure, telecommunication. In politics, he was 20 years in Renovación Nacional, and he was a senator for between 1990 and 1998. On 3 occasions, he was a candidate for president, and he was able to get there in the previous period. And he was tarnished for allegations of corruption after he left his 4 years of presidency. Something similar happened in this presidency because of his cousin. His cousin has been very repressive because he was in charge of security. In his young time, Chadwick, he was vinculated to the dictatorship of Pinochet. In 1993, he was almost candidate for president, and he was manipulating the political threads. The scandal was known as the Piñera Gate. According to some polls, his popularity has fallen after the October events. He is now the president with the lowest approval ever since there was any register. And today, the streets of Chile are full of protesters. We have our correspondent from Chile. Hello, Paula. Hi, Ray. Greetings to everybody in Telesur. Well, the situation is chaotic because very early in the morning, Plaza Dignidad, this is a square that we have here in Chile, is totally full by policemen on motorcycles, and they began to throw tear gas to anybody who was passing by. There was going to be a protest called on this morning, but it was impossible to get here. Ray, and in the midst of what we were doing previous to this link, we were in this square, and 30 policemen started to go into the plaza and trying to capture some students that were protesting with their well-known yells. And Miguel Angel, who is a camera, many protesters were going to come. It's impossible because it's full of police that are willing to throw and shoot at the people. Thank you very much, Paola. This is last-minute information. Thank you very much to all of the team of Telesur in Chile. By the way, the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, that is directed by the former president of Chile, Michelle Bachelet, has presented their report of the current situation that the government is going through with the government of Sebastián Piñera, and above all, his role during the current protests. And it says there has been a high number of human rights attacks, and there is an excessive use and unnecessary use of force, and this has led to torture, mistreatments, sexual violence, and arbitrary detentions. In 2019, Mr. Piñera has had the worst record of protests and social unrest, as well as the increase in the price of public transportation. And this was the most recent trigger, the protest. This was just the tip of the iceberg. And the Chileans have said it's not just because of this. The protests have shown that there's so much inequality. 1% of the Chileans possess 26.5 richness, and 50% of the family have 2.1 of the richness of the entire country. Let's check digital websites, and let's start with the Telesur website. The debts of democracy in Chile after 30 years of the transition. After 30 years that General Pinochet gave the presidential ban to Elwin, the transformations to favor the society is still pending. 30 years ago, on March 11, 1990, one of the darkest periods of Chile was extinguishing, and now opening the transition to democracy. This period began after a plebiscite of 1988, when the Chileans decided to put an end of the 17-year government of Pinochet. And let's not forget that Pinochet left his personal constitution. Then there was a election asking if there will be an election in Chile, asking the Chileans if they want to change this constitution. This new constitution will have a status in policy, and this has impeded a real transformation. Up until now, there's a heritage of the authoritarian government of Pinochet. This was a neoliberal government in 1975. This is why, as a recommendation, I suggest that you read another of our articles called Chile, 2 Million Women Against the Patriarchy. It's been written by Carlos Aznares and Maria Torreira. I will select some of the paragraphs. Very early, we acknowledged this was going to be a historical for women, but for all of the people in Chile, which we are demanding Piñera to withdraw. We all went to Plaza of Dignidad, and when we got on the metro, the environment already foresaw what was coming up. Here we have the poster that says, "We are all workers, and the feminist revolt must continue until it's worth living." It was many of us who were just smiling and hugging each other, although we didn't know each other, because we knew that we were there, that we were decided to stop the machismo and the patriarchy, not ignoring that what we were generating was being repeated in every city of Chile and any city in the world, which increased the meaning of such a huge mobilization. Every poster and every yell that we did was where we were started, and everything. When we saw all of those women that were attacking against capitalism, and all of the politicians of the right wing. And these are the people that have been with the Concertación. These people who have made the normal discourse as something normal for the country. That is why we are marching, to transform rage to joy, feeling ourselves strong, even with the repetitive provocations of the police, to which Pinochet so much loved, and many of the false democratic people. Short after, and when they kept on coming to the place, thousands and thousands of women, the policemen began the repression without any excuse, just because they have the permission of their owners, and they are a body that sooner or later shall disappear. They were not able to stop us, and the entire world knows that regardless of the censorship, the dictatorship of Chile only knows how to repress its citizens. And these 2 million throats made it clear that Piñera is an assassin, just like Pinochet. This is how we see it from different angles of society. This is how people are calling out the government of Piñera. We also ask you to participate with us. Give us your criteria of today's question. This is what this is. It's 2 years of the government of Sebastián Piñera. What is the strategy he has with having more of 80% of disapproval to continue leading Chile? Will he just cross his arms? Will people not do anything and allow all of the torture that they're having? Out Piñera. Look at the picture. Let's go to the first pause. We'll be right back.
Estamos en guerra contra un enemigo
against an enemy, a powerful enemy, that does not respect anyone and is willing to use violence with no limit. The agreement for a new constitution that was agreed on Friday means a wide commitment, and I am sure that has the majority of support of the population, which will have an active and effective participation. Because sometimes it's not only the will of the people to abuse, but it's also the position of the women to be abused. Along with the European Union, we have defended with conviction and solid all of the respect to human rights in Venezuela, because they are an essential part of the principles that have always oriented our foreign policy. In the midst of an intense political uproar, President Piñera is now having 2 years of the presidency. How have been the last years? Sebastián Piñera is 2 years at the second mandate with 80% of disapproval. In the midst of heated discussion, Piñera has presented the following reforms with the Congress that have to do with the pension plan. But the strategy has not been effective because the levels of rejection are still high. The people consider that that the reform to the Constitution is not enough in the terms of human rights. Piñera is harshly criticized because of the repression during the civil protest, the unnecessary use of force and tortures, mistreatments, sexual violence, and arbitrary detention are some of the violations that have been pinpointed by the Special Envoy for Human Rights. United Nations has displayed a mission to Chile to revise this topic of human rights. To this, we must add all of the denouncements against the police and the military in the midst of the policies that are going on for more than 4 months. President Piñera has not been able to reactivate the economy of the country. 43% think that they're just the same. according to the institution of census, there are many people, there are many Chileans who are unemployed. Analysts say that the main reasons for his disapproval are the economic and the violence against human rights, and the always visible protection to the big powers of the country. Let's begin our analysis. From Chile, we have Esteban Silva. He's a sociologist, and we also have another international expert from Bolivia. Let's begin with Esteban. Esteban, there was a video that you were presenting on how the people were calling for the protest. And today it's 2 years of his presidency. How has this been? Well, today we were on the streets, and there were thousands of people. Today is a day of protest that was called on by the social organizations, while Piñera was celebrating 2 years of his country. And his country is totally solitary, and that won't let people get near the presidential palace. What is at play today, with the mobilizations all through the country, 30 years after the March 11th of 1990. And this is the closure of a transition from the dictatorship of Pinochet to a democracy that was never able to complete the transition. That is what the social movements are demanding. And this government has no political support, and a country that has been totally mobilized, and that they are demanding the change of the model of this neoliberal capitalism, extreme capitalism model that was presented during these last years as a successful model. And this shows that there's a bankruptcy, that there's extreme, and that there's a neoliberal extreme project, and everything is playing through the privatization, the free trade agreements, and the loss of the economic and social rights of the workers of the social movements and the majority of people. This is the scenario 30 years after the beginning of a transition that never was able to conclude. And these democracies of low intensity and the government of Piñera has now had to resist the protests of thousands of people on the streets. Thank you very much. Please stay on the line. Let's go with Gabriel Villalba. It's 30 years of the transition to now an alleged democracy. What do you think this all represents? Well, a greeting to all the people there. And ever since October last year, people are mobilizing. It's important to also understand the lack of legitimacy of Piñera with this absolute rejection of the majority of people. And there has been a scenario of total social shock. This phenomenon, when there was the coup on Salvador Allende, all of the neoliberal institutions began to operate. And after this collective shock and this terror, I think Piñera tries to reproduce and have reproduced for decades this fear structure. This is why these are the most strongest governments in terms of repression. We must understand that he is totally isolated in the international community. He is only supported by the United States because the government of Trump is on its way out. And the government of Bolsonaro from Brazil. And it's interesting to see that Chile has been historically the head of the liberal institutions, which goes very well with all of the private companies, and that go along with all of the Washington consensus. So now I think Chile is living a late revolution. And this is trying to come out from a very structured society. And let's not forget that if the people stand up, this is going to be with the popular movements. And they're trying to understand new ways of understanding politics that has historically been undermined. Thank you, Gabriel. And now Esteban. Gabriel already said it. The National Assembly is at play, but I insist, how is this being seen? Maybe the renovation of the constitutional text should be by listening the word of the people. Well, first of all, it's important to put in context everything. So first, it's the mobilization and the popular organization. Here we know it as the estallido, or explosion. There is a long line of struggles of the students, of farmers, through all these years that have now exploded ever since October 18. This is the movement of protest, of mobilization, of organization that is trying to restate a new constitution, and that puts away this idea of a small government, and that's totally gives a lot of subsidies. And also gives priority to these to the capitals that are playing with the economy of Chile. And we hope that these people should not just concentrate all of the richness. So it's the people of Chile who is now putting the constitutional topic from the bottom to the top. And it's the elite of the government and a couple of other parties that have no that obligates me to attain this lawsuit. However, this allows that the working people and the majority of the citizenships that will have a say on April 16, and they're going to ask the Chileans if they agree with changing the constitution. So yes, that's what I was asking you. What is the guarantee that the new constitution will be written with bearing in mind the needs and the will of the Chilean people? What are the guarantees? Well, there are no guarantees. Everything is in dispute. There is a systematic abuse against human rights. There is a government that is closed inside itself and doesn't want to hear the people that is organized. We've got a Congress that keeps on legislating to the back of the people. A series of reforms that don't affect profoundly any change. And in this context, we're going to begin this constitutional process. So far, any demands will be attained through the street mobilizations. So the most relevant, and I think with this I will be answering your question, is if the people think they're going to win, that just to change the constitution, but of course it's full of problems because, first of all, it was established by Congress and not by the Constitutional Writing Commission. But in any circumstance, the demand and what the people want is that there is an assembly to make this constitution. And while this doesn't happen, there will keep on being mobilizations. So this is the beginning of a process of dispute, not over a new constitutional committee, a constitution, but it's the beginning of the dispute to change the neoliberal model. And of course, there are no guarantees. The only guarantee that the people and the citizens have is to keep on being mobilized during the whole process. Thank you, Esteban. Gabriel, how do you think that the world is observing this Chile that for decades was sold internationally as the successful model of the neoliberal group? And especially after October, what type of restructuring do you think Chile has been undergoing? Well, at an international level, the indicators of progress and the economic numbers have changed, and they have become more political every time. And all of these people represent an archaic way of measurement. Currently, we have some other ways to measure them. But right now, Chile is on the top 10 of the most unequal countries in the world. But also, in Chile, the vote is not obligatory. Probably the Constitution will change this. And this has a lot to do with the participation of the people. Look, 50 years ago, there was in Chile a book of two journalists who expressed their imposition of all of the patterns of Disney. So I think that the Chileans are trying to rethink all of this and to establish new structures about security, public citizen participation, education, and this will mean a new way of doing policy. So if Chile goes in this road, this will be they will lead a new block of progressive governments. This is they will lead the Bolivia, Venezuela, Cuba. I think it's a revolution that has reached Chile. Let's not forget when Piñera went to the United States, they said, look, this small land is You can see how there was a submission on behalf of Piñera to Trump in this last visit. I think it's important to reestablish how the Chileans structure themselves and how they see themselves abroad and how they work abroad too. It's important to listen to these spontaneous movements of Chileans, but I think it's also important to state topics that are of vital need and that should be in the Constitution. And how can we develop a foreign policy? In Bolivia, for example, we developed the diplomacy of the people. This is an understanding of the social movements. What will Chile offer the world? This is what the new paradigm that Chile should establish in their constitution. This dictatorship of the neoliberalism has to be over now. And I think that Latin American awakening from the vanguard of Venezuela and Chile will show us new ways of understanding the world. And we should start from Latin America and shine the light on the rest of the world. I suggest that you all follow El Ciudadano de Chile. This is a key news media to focus on and to be liberated from the media censorship that there is in the country. Well, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you about international policies. Thank you very much, Gabriel. We thank you for your participation. Thank you for your time for our critical moves. See you next time. Let's go to a pause, and let's not forget that we have the question of the day, and we would like you to participate. It's 2 years of the government of Piñera. What is the strategy that he has to continue governing Chile after having a disapproval rate of over 80%? Will the people just cross their arms and not do anything with the violations of the government? We would like to hear from you. We will be right back.
De la mano del presidente Piñera, las fichas del tablero geopolítico chileno se han ido moviendo de fracaso en fracaso, según expertos. Vamos a repasar el contexto.
Las intenciones del presidente
The intentions of Sebastián Piñera to lead the regional movement, because it had a stable government, totally failed with all of the events of October. And Piñera was obligated to cancel the COP25. The explanation was that the main reason was to regain the public order. However, everybody saw how the police violated human rights of the people in Chile. And everybody agrees that the discredit of Bolsonaro, the corruption calls of Colombia, and the problems that Macri had and lost the presidency, all of these are part of the Grupo of Lima. And Piñera used all type of power he had to discredit the government of Nicolás Maduro. In his actions against Venezuela, he went to the border with Juan Guaidó, and he was there with the alleged humanitarian help in 2019. Experts say that his role has faded away, and now he's a very questioned president. Sebastián Piñera promoted the creation of the Prosur that was made with the regional government with a right-wing tendency. This is considered as a mechanism of the United States to interfere in the region. Critics of Piñera, they say that with all of the violations against human rights due to the brutal repression of the police, the president of Chile was also in conspiracy with the president of with the so-called President Yanine Áñez in Bolivia. Well, let's go deeper in this, what we just said. Now we do it with an expert, Carlos Casanueva. He's a history professor and the representative of the Communist Party here in Venezuela. Thank you. Thank you for coming. No, thank you for the invitation. Carlos, as an expert and a connoisseur of this topic, I would like to start reflecting with you on what he was able to attain in these 2 years, especially in this last semester. Well, from October 17th up until now, Piñera was able to attain something that he didn't even think of, because he offered and he promised. And let's not forget that he did the large majority that made him president. He offered stability, security, jobs. And it was a very strong campaign, very much exploiting the psychology of the Chilean. And he used a lot of the fear against Venezuela. But what we do have to accept is that he did arrive with popular support. But after a year in the president's office, he did not go through with his promises. Even for the people who voted for Piñera, even the middle class, and the poor people who also believed in his promises. And just a couple of months down the road, they are very mad. And now he has 84% of disapproval. Well, I think that it can be even lower. It is. They speak of 6% to support of Piñera. And who are the 6%? It's the 7 owners of the sea and the most richest sectors of the country. I don't think that not even the right-wing economic movement support Piñera anymore. Okay, but he was able to unite all of the Chileans. That is something that he probably he wasn't seeking. Of course, everybody is united against him. And ever since October, the Chileans decided this is enough, and they stood up. And ever since, there is a new dictatorship in Chile. I would like to speak about the 30 years of the transition to democracy. But what we see in the images of that repression of the police, the same speech of Piñera that is fundamentally misogynist, and there are all types of discrimination. This is the continuity of the dictatorship, or am I wrong? No, not only the continuity. But we remember that when Piñera took office, he was going to try to play a role that is going to be close to the United States. Well, it turns out that it was even worse than what we thought. The violations against human rights from October up until now, we don't know how Michelle Bachelet doesn't even see what happens in Chile, and he doesn't speak of what happens in Colombia. But what we see is the continuity of what happened in previous government, like the one of Michelle Bachelet. This is the continuity in the last 30 years. And if you add the years of the dictatorship, it's even more. There is a group of people that say enough, and they took to the streets. But the violations in these months, and the amount of dead people, the amount of mutilated, the amount of tortured, of political prisoners. I was a political prisoner of dictatorship. I was in the first line of the 80s. I salute and the young people that are now fighting in the Dignity Plaza. This is the new first line. I was in December in Santiago de Chile. I went to Plaza Dignidad, and what I saw, it's a different Chile. They're rebel, but I also see a Chile with organization and very aware of what should be done. And I saw a youth that are totally lost any fear against the police. Well, yes, when I was protesting, I was afraid. We never knew if we were going to come back alive or dead. But these young people are showing us that this first line, I want to offer my recognition of these people that are now confronting this structure. And what the students have done, they've opened the door to protest against fascism and this model. The people are not willing to put up with this anymore. With the system of the retirement, how does it work? Well, let me tell you, my dad used a former Social Security plan, and it was like 80% of his former salary. The colleagues that have now retired are taking 15 to 20% of their former income. And this applied to every citizen except for the military and police. So this is the neoliberal model, but now with Piñera. And now we apply fascism, persecution. Let me tell you, during this week, there was a paramilitary group that was armed. How is it possible that the police defend the ultra-right headquarters? How is it possible that they protect the ultra-right protest by calling on violence? And just recently, we saw this reporter that nobody can get near them, and when the left wing needs some support. So this is pure fascism. This is why the people of Chile are saying in the streets, and they're asking for Piñera to call for a plebiscite, but it was pressured by La Calle. So now we have two routes. We either have the street of the prison and pressure that there be a convention on the 26th for a dignified Chile. And what did the street do? They opened the street opened a small window through which the Chilean people can breathe and can see outside and see that something else is possible. And Daniel Jaude has said today, and many social sectors, they say that they need a great agreement to call for elections and that there be a renovation of the political system. That's the only option that will bring peace. This would be a real peace. with popular agreement, and this would not let this to just go downhill. Thank you very much, Carlos. You're always welcomed. Let's go to our conclusions. We see how the people of Chile has hoped to create a new constitution. And now they have raised their voice and they want to change this so-called success model. But will the country be able to leave this social politics crisis now led by Piñera? Will they be able to shift all of their political system? Or will this promise just be a smoke curtain just to stop all of the protests? This is what we'll be following. Thank you very much.
You're watching Telesur English. I'm Katrina Goss. These are the headlines at this hour. The coronavirus has now reached 14 countries of Latin America, where there are 144 confirmed cases and there have been 2 deaths. Brazil is the most affected nation so far, with 34 cases. However, no deaths have been reported there. Meanwhile, both Argentina and Panama have reported 1 death each. Bolivia confirmed the country's first 2 cases of the coronavirus on Tuesday, and health authorities in Honduras confirmed the country's first 2 cases on Wednesday. The majority of the cases are people who had recently travelled from European countries. Joe Biden won the state of Michigan as well as Mississippi, Missouri and Idaho in Tuesday's 6-state primary in the United States. The former vice president is far ahead of his only contender, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, in terms of the number of delegates needed to win the Democratic Party nomination. According to the latest results, Sanders only won North Dakota, and after almost 90% of the votes were counted in Washington state, the 2 candidates were neck and neck. After Super Tuesday last week and this Tuesday's primaries, Biden has 864 delegates and Sanders has 710. To secure the nomination, a candidate requires the support of 1,999 pledged delegates by July's Democratic National Convention in Milwaukee. If no candidate reaches this amount, the next step is a more complex voting system with superdelegates who can vote in any way they want to decide on the final candidate. Iran has warned the UN atomic watchdog to be wary of empty claims passed on to it after the agency raised questions about the Islamic Republic's nuclear program. The International Atomic Energy Agency last week accused Iran of denying its inspectors access to 2 sites in January. In response, Iran's ambassador to the agency said that such a request should be based on clear reasons and principles.
So the main point is not simply about providing 1 or 2 complementary accesses. It is mainly about the fact that such requests should be based on a clear reasoning and principles in accordance with the agency's relevant documents, which was not the case for the last 2 requests for complementary accesses. The United States is a country that possessing thousands of nuclear warheads used these warheads against innocent people in Japan, and afterwards threatened the other nations to use these weapons against them. It's ridiculous that this regime talks regarding non-proliferation, and while Iran is in full compliance with its obligations under the CSN Additional Protocol and the JCPOA, accusing Iran for non-proliferation risk activities.
And those are the headlines at this hour. For these and more stories, go to our website at telesurenglish.net.